While Hollywood spent the 1950s fantasizing about computers of the future, scientists and engineers were inventing them. Hello, and welcome to the journey inside the computer. Now, when this film was released, modern computers were in their infancy, but humans had been building calculating machines for thousands of years. It may surprise you to know that Stonehenge was probably a giant astronomical calculator. Here's one of the first portable calculators. It was invented about 5,000 years ago. It could add and subtract and didn't require batteries. So ingenious, the abacus is still in use today. Later on, Charles Babbage laid the groundwork for modern computers in the early 1800s. He designed mechanical calculating machines with 4 parts: input, data storage, a processor, and output. Babbage's machines never worked, but today's computers have a similar design. Our field reporters have more on this story.
Thanks, Annette. We are here at the Computer Museum History Center, where they have assembled some of the most important computers in the last 50 years. I guess you could say this place is kind of like a Computer Hall of Fame.
Great, Brahman. But what's with a toaster?
Oh, well, good question. See, this toaster illustrates the 4 basic parts of the computer. Now, just like a computer at your home, the raw data goes in, the information gets stored, then this raw data gets processed, or in this case, toasted. Bam! The end result. It is pretty tasty. But there still is one big difference between the computer and the toaster. That's the processor. See, the computer's microprocessor is so powerful and so versatile, it can do so many more tasks than just this toaster. But the key thing to remember is that both of these machines still have these 4 basic parts. Let's start with input. When the first general-purpose computer was built in 1945, data had to be entered by flipping switches and plugging wires. That computer, by the way, was called the Electronic Numerical Integrator and Calculator, or ENIAC. Can you even imagine having a computer without a keyboard to input data? For years, scientists and engineers, they had to flip levers and twist dials, and they even had to punch holes in cards just to input data. Even with this kitchen computer, people were expected to flip switches to store their recipes. Now, of course, today, input has taken on many different forms, from the click of a mouse to a digital microphone to everything else in between. Rebecca has the second part of this story.
Just like Babbage's calculating machine, the second thing a computer has to do is store data, either temporarily while it's being processed or long-term, so you can access it when you want it again. One kind of storage is read-only memory, or ROM. Now, ROM is programmed into a computer's chips, so it can't be altered or lost. You use ROM each time you boot up your computer. Another kind of storage is RAM, random access memory. Now, RAM is temporary storage. It's constantly being erased and changed. As you type in a story, for example, both the words and the software instructions for your word processing program are stored in RAM. If you shut off the computer without saving your file, your story is gone, kaput. Fortunately, you won't lose the software because there's another copy of it on a third type of storage. Hard drives and floppy drives. This monster was one of the earliest hard drives, and today, this hard drive can hold 100 times more information.
The processor is what makes the computer work. All data and instructions have to pass through it. The processor takes in raw data, it performs tasks called for by the software, and it communicates with the rest of the computer through the motherboard. The processor does all of this through rows of switches. In fact, the history of the processor is really just a story about switches. Early computers processed information with thousands of switches like these. Vacuum tubes. They were big, bulky, and hot. And the ENIAC had over 18,000 of them. In the late 1950s, the processors used a switch like this. It was a lot smaller and it put out a lot less heat. By the early 1960s, the switches had been shrunk down to this size. As for the computer, well, that's another story. But it wasn't until the 1970s that all the processing functions of a computer could be put onto a single chip. Here's the first microprocessor, the 4004, invented by Intel in 1971 for this calculator. People called it a computer on a chip. Microprocessors could be programmed to perform many different tasks. and as computer hobbyists soon realized, these processors could be used as the brains of a personal computer. Since the 1970s, microprocessors have been made much smaller and much more powerful. It's really the processors that have driven the computer revolution.
But hold on, Brahman. All that processing power doesn't get you anywhere unless people get the results. That brings us to the final part of a computer, output. Output is anything that can be recognized by us or a machine, and it can take a wide range of forms, including sound, video, or in the case of this old classic, print.
People dubbed early computers electronic brains as if they were like human brains. But everything a computer does must be processed mathematically. Today, computers can make decisions based on huge amounts of input. But can they really think like humans? Rebecca consulted some experts.
Computers have received a lot of attention for their skill in chess, and players regularly practice against computerized programs. So we thought they might have an insight on how a computer's brain is different than a human's.
It's different because, yes, the computer is much more constant. It makes better moves than you would think it would.
The computers think more moves forward than a human, and they look at all the possibilities in a couple of seconds, and we look at all the possibilities in a couple of hours.
Do you think a computer has a brain?
No, I don't think it has a brain. It just kind of has memory, and that it just uses that to... It doesn't really think.
Yeah, creativity does count. It, first of all, helps you more with your planning. You can see further ahead and more complicated moves.
You can be tired when you play, you have fears. You can be afraid of the opponent you're going to play, and that really damages your skill. You can be a lot weaker because of that. But the computer has no idea who it's playing. It's not afraid of anything. It's not tired.
Checkmate.
That's the story from Here and Net. It looks like computers and human brains still have a few differences.
Computers haven't taken on the sinister form that Hollywood directors may have imagined. Instead, they've evolved into powerful tools that can only do what we tell them to do. Whoa. We live in a world filled with electricity. It's in every rock, it's in the sky, it's in the food you eat, it's even in your body. If you don't believe me, drag your feet as you walk across the carpet, then reach out and touch something metal. Ow. People have known about electricity for thousands of years, but it's only in the last 200 years or so that we've discovered ways to make it useful. What was the key? Circuits and switches. We had to find ways to channel the electricity to make it flow where we wanted it and be able to shut it off when we didn't want it. But first, we had to understand what electricity was. Our world is made up of atoms, and every atom is a balance of positively charged protons and negatively charged electrons. Electrical current flows when the electrons jump from one atom to the next. Some materials like copper and silver conduct electricity very well. Their electrons jump around easily, so we call them conductors. Other materials are non-conductive. Their electrons resist jumping, so electricity doesn't flow through them. Materials like rock, wood, or rubber are called non-conductors. Non-conductors or insulators are important in circuits because they keep the electricity from flowing where you don't want it. They insulate you from electricity. All circuits consist of 4 parts. First, a power source that sets electrons in motion. Keep in mind the power source doesn't produce electrons. It's more like a pump that pushes electrons through the circuit. Second, you need a conducting path, wires made of conductive material that can carry the flow of electrons from one side of the power source to the other. If there's a break at any point in the conducting path, the electricity will stop flowing. Third, you need the electrical load, which is where the electricity does its work. Whether it's lighting a bulb, heating a room, or powering a video game, it's a load. After all, if you go through the trouble of making a circuit, you want it to do some work. Of course, if you didn't like what your circuit does, you need the fourth part, a switch to shut off the power. Can you imagine never being able to turn the electricity off? That's almost as bad as never having it at all. Now that we've covered the circuit basics, let's look at some of the amazing circuits engineers have designed and built. We'll start with a report on a circuit that's part of your life right now.
My goal was to find the biggest circuit, and I think I found a pretty good candidate. This circuit is so big it covers a large portion of North America. Now, it's much more complex than the tabletop circuit you may build in your classroom. It's got lots of power sources and a web of wires, but it works on the same principles. We're standing here at the base of one of this circuit's power sources. This dam stands almost 300 feet tall, but it's really just a power source like the battery in your tabletop circuit. Where a battery produces a small flow of electricity using a chemical reaction, machinery inside this dam produces a huge flow of electrons that can run for thousands of miles. Loud in here, huh? This is where the electricity is produced. Water falling at great pressure spins these turbines 163 times a minute, setting electrons in motion. And because electrons move at the speed of light, they can travel huge distances in a fraction of a second. And remember, this dam is just one of the hundreds of power sources in our circuit. More than a single line, this circuit stretches like a huge spider web that covers 14 western states and 2 Canadian provinces. Now, this is one of the major crossroads right here. One of these lines goes all the way to Canada, and another one reaches the Mexican border. The power's ultimate destination is determined in the utility company's power control center. By simply flipping a switch, operators can divert the power to anywhere on the grid. The primary connectors in these regional power grids are giant transmission lines that take the electricity long distances from power plants to substations. At the substation, transformers reduce the power's voltage so that it can be safely transmitted over smaller power lines. These distribution lines then carry the power to individual schools, homes, and businesses. And that circuit doesn't end till it reaches your home. We take it for granted, but our modern lifestyle depends on every part of this circuit working perfectly. And what happens if something fails? We're all in the dark.
Thank you, Rebecca. So now that we've got the electrons flowing and explored the granddaddy of all circuits, what does this have to do with computers? Brahman has that story.
This circuit looks similar to the one we saw earlier, but if you look closely, you'll see one important difference. I've installed a different switch. What's interesting, though, is that this switch has no moving parts. It's called a transistor, and it works by an electrical charge. Add electricity here, and the current flows. Take it away, and the switch is open. Now, how does this work? How can a transistor possibly turn a circuit on and off without any moving parts? Well, remember, Annette mentioned that the world is made up of 2 kinds of materials, electrical conductors and insulators. Well, really, there's a third group of materials that can be made to conduct electricity under certain conditions. We call them semiconductors. Let's go over to the blue screen and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, silicon. One of the most common elements on Earth is a semiconductor. Now, under normal conditions, silicon is non-conductive. But when you mix in different elements like boron or phosphorus and then add electricity, silicon becomes conductive. Here's how. This is a cross-section of a transistor. The bottom layer is silicon. And when a positive electrical charge is introduced into the transistor, it attracts negatively charged electrons into a channel through which electricity starts flowing. When this happens, the switch is on. Remove the electrical charge and the switch is off. It's as simple as that, a switch with no moving parts. It led directly to the microprocessor in today's powerful computers.
Whether a circuit spans a continent or is the size of your thumbnail, whether the switches are giant levers or microscopic transistors, all circuits work basically the same way. By understanding how circuits work and how they could control the flow of electricity through those circuits, engineers set the stage for a technological revolution.
So what kind of codes do you use when you don't want people to understand you?
The type of codes we use is like, you know, body language.
You'd be like,
Say something with our body or with our eyes.
Whatever. We just talk in Spanish. We write anything we want in Spanish.
We're not allowed to wear beepers, but when we do use them, we have like codes which are numbers, like 143 is I love you. Trub.
Yes.
We mostly speak in like street slang. You know, it would be like, you know, somebody is off the heezy.
When we found out that our email wasn't confidential, we started using certain numbers and the shift and number keys.
You just kind of like mess up the words a little bit, break them up. Like, for example, her name's Claudia, so it'd be Clafa Ufiti Fiafa.
You've probably used a secret code at some point in your life. I used to talk in my own code so my brother couldn't understand me. Let's see. Hifi wafaz to fo de fum, hifi kafut a funda first a fan mafi. Computers have a special code too, though it never changes and it's not really a secret. Information in a computer can only be represented by ones and zeros. This code is called digital information. Why ones and zeros? Because those are the only two numbers you need to reflect the flow of electricity. It's either on or it's off. On is 1, off is 0. Everything you say to a computer has to be put in terms of these two numbers. How do you give instructions with ones and zeros? Rebecca is at the Intel Museum with the answer to that question.
have you ever counted in binary numbers? Probably not, because the digits build up too fast. 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0. Now all those numbers only take you up to 8 in the base 10 numbers we use. I mean, would you rather say 20 or 10110? Now for humans, the computer's code can be a real pain. Check out how long it takes just to make one letter. Though it may seem tedious for us to pound out a letter using ones and zeros, keep in mind a computer can do the same thing millions of times a second, and it never gets bored. In fact, each button on this board represents a binary digit, or bit. Now, a bit is the smallest unit of digital information. Taken together, these 8 bits are equal to 1 byte. And each unique combination of 8 bits has a meaning for the computer. When I enter 8 binary numbers into the board, a letter appears up here. The computer translates the numbers into a letter. How? Using a special code called ASCII, the American Standard Code for Information Interchange. It's a standard way for computers to translate binary information into a letter, a number, even a punctuation mark. This board gives us 2 to the 8th possible combinations of zeros and ones, so we can create 256 different values using these bits. Many computers today have 32-bit microprocessors. With 32 buttons, we could create almost 4.3 billion different values. That's why 32-bit computers are so much more powerful than 8-bit computers. Imagine what it would be like if we could pound out the bits as fast as a computer. And that's not even close to a computer's speed.
What's truly amazing about bits and bytes is what people have learned to do with them. They don't just represent numbers or letters. They can represent colors, sounds, and images. Now that we know the computer's code, let's see how it can be used to create images.
Everything seems to be digital these days. Old movies are remastered in digital, watches are digital, CDs are digital. Excuse me, but digital's just a bunch of ones and zeros, you know? I mean, you can't really do anything with a bunch of ones and zeros, right? Well, now that's why we've come to the ballpark, is to take a closer look at the power of digital. This scoreboard is like a big computer monitor, a really big computer monitor. And the guy that runs it sits way over there in the press box. Anyway, just like the monitor on your school computer, everything on this scoreboard is run through a combination of ones and zeros. Hey, Dave, can I get a dot, please? Observe, a dot. Well, actually, it's one picture element, or a pixel. You see, the scoreboard's computer receives a binary command telling it which pixel to light up in exactly that location. This dot is just its response. Now, by entering a new group of ones and zeros, the programmer can change which pixel is lit. Watch. A typical computer monitor has 480 lines of pixels, and each line has 640 pixels. That's over 307,000 individual pixels that the computer has to control. Here's one pixel from a scoreboard. The computer has to handle thousands of these instantaneously, and this is just a monochrome display. Here's a color pixel. For color monitors, not only does the computer have to handle which pixel to light up, but it also has to give the correct combination of primary colors to each individual pixel. Primary colors being red, blue, and green. And this has to happen very fast. So, what do you get when you add all these pixel changes together? So, the next time you're at the ballpark and you see something like this, you'd better keep in mind that computer power is just as impressive as home run power. So now who controls all these pixels? Let's find out. All right, I'm here in the press box with Dave Martindale, the man behind the ones and zeros. So, Dave, how do you get these ones and zeros into the computer?
Well, luckily for me, I don't have to deal with the ones and zeros. The engineer at the software company has done that all for me, and I just point and click with what I want to show on the scoreboard, just like you'd point and click with your computer at home or at school.
So you actually never see the binary code?
I don't see the binary code. What I can see is computer language based on the binary code right here, which is what the computer reads and translates into the pixels being illuminated on the scoreboard.
There's a binary code of ones and zeros below, beneath this code.
Right. This is the code that the computer reads, and this code is based on the binary code.
And so how do you actually get a pixel to light up on the screen?
Well, if a home run comes up, I click on the animation that I want to display, and goes out to the scoreboard.
So you control everything that appears on the scoreboard?
Everything that appears up there. Animations, messages, Brahman, welcome to the game. Anything you want to see on the scoreboard comes from here.
So now when you use a computer, remember, the microprocessor works with many different software programs that break down our instructions into ones and zeros that the computer can understand. Next, the computer takes this binary result, or answer, and turns it into an output that we can understand. Computers really are the ultimate translators.
Bits and bytes, ones and zeros, digital information is a simple code, but engineers have transformed it into a powerful tool. It's the speed of the microprocessor that makes the results so amazing. Whoever thought we'd be able to share information around the world on the internet, create astounding graphic images, or play a little cyber baseball? Swing. Strike. Microprocessors are everywhere. They're so prevalent in your life that you probably take them for granted, as long as they act the way they're supposed to. They control much more than your home computer. Every room in your house is filled with appliances and gadgets that contain these computers on a chip. Here's a perfect example of an embedded processor. Devices like this control everything from the brakes in your family's car, to the volume on your CD player, to the temperature in your classroom right now. Many processors are relatively simple. They're programmed when they're manufactured to handle only a few functions. The chip in this remote control, for example, can only change a few functions like a television's volume and channel. This is the kind of microprocessor that controls a computer's functions. It's more powerful and flexible than an embedded processor. It can be programmed with many different instructions to perform a variety of tasks, from playing games and word processing to creating art or accessing the internet. It's smaller than a dime, but it contains millions of transistors and performs millions of instructions a second. Where you and I might take a few seconds to add 27 and 39, a good microprocessor can do the same calculation in billionths of a second. But before the microprocessor jumps into action, someone has to tell it what to do. That's what our first story is about. Let's see if Rebecca has survived her morning wake-up call.
Thanks, I survived just fine. But you know, it got me thinking, how do microprocessors work? And how do engineers get them to do what they want them to do? The key seems to be giving the computer the right instructions, but that may not be as easy as it sounds. We discovered there's a real art to giving good instructions, whether you're talking to a computer or another human. Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to the main public library?
You go down this street.
Down this street.
Down this street. I think that's Main.
You go all the way Highway 29.
You go down Yacht.
Hit first.
Left, down a couple of blocks.
You make a right.
Take a left, follow Main.
Which is Lincoln Avenue.
Past the state courthouse. The street turns around like this.
It's a big pink building. I think that'd be there. It's real noticeable.
You can't miss it.
Computers need very clear instructions. They only do exactly what you tell them to do. And you have to tell them to do it every time. Clarity is the real art of programming. We recently talked to a software engineer. So what is the art of computer programming?
The art of computer programming is really getting this very stupid thing to be able to do creative things. We don't think of computers as being stupid, but they are. They only know how to do certain things.
So how do you do that? How do you get all this complex information and make it so a computer can understand?
Computers have a vocabulary. Like we have a vocabulary. We're talking right now using words we both know. But it's not just words we both know. I could say, for example, words out of order. It wouldn't make any sense to you to go, what are you talking about?
What?
Exactly. So there's a certain structure, a sentence structure. We have to create words, put words together that make sense by rules that we both understand. Writing computer programs is the exact same thing. It has a vocabulary. It has words we can use to communicate with the computer.
What's the one thing that somebody should know about being a software engineer?
I think the most important thing is being able to think logically. Being able to start with an ideal and be able to break that very large ideal into smaller little pieces. And then breaking those smaller pieces into yet smaller pieces and understanding how to link all those pieces together so that one piece does something, the next piece does something else, and then finally you get the result that you expected. So you need to be able to think logically.
And finally you get the big picture.
Exactly, and the big bucks.
Nice.
I hope so.
We've looked at how the software engineer gives the computer its instructions, but once the microprocessor receives those instructions, how does it handle them? Brahman has a report.
What I've discovered, Annette, is that the different parts of a microprocessor do different jobs. See, these jobs break down into three primary functions: fetch, decode, and execute. Our robots here can help you understand how this works, but first we have to slow it way down. Remember, this is all happening in millionths of a second. This is fetch. It retrieves program instructions and data one at a time and passes them on to the next function, decode. When decode receives the instructions, it simply reads which operation is called for and sends that information to the correct function in execute. Execute then uses binary calculators to do the math. Remember, computers can only use ones and zeros. The results of the calculation are then output to your screen. And that's pretty much the story. Fetch, decode, and execute do these same tasks over and over again millions of times a second.
Wait a minute, Brahman. Robots don't live in microprocessors. How does your model relate to a real chip?
Okay, Annette, that was a good question. Well, the fetch, decode, and execute functions are actually done by the transistors on the microprocessor. If you look at a chip, it looks a lot like a miniature city with different sized blocks and streets. And just like in a real city, related functions are clustered in specific areas. This area is where fetch is based. Remember, fetch retrieves program instructions and data from the computer. Over there is where decode prepares the data and instructions for processing. And execute does the math in this area. There you go, Annette.
Thanks, Brahman. By working together, fetch, decode, and execute can do amazing things. When you listen to a CD, every sound that comes out of your speaker is produced by the same series of commands. The computers that control a space shuttle launch run the show with fetch, decode, and execute. Sort of gives you a new respect for doing simple tasks well, doesn't it? Nice boots, huh? Perfect for that special occasion. Today we're going to look at how microprocessors are designed and manufactured. Microprocessors are so small and so complex that a speck of dust can destroy their circuits. Sort of like a giant meteor landing on Manhattan and rearranging the streets. To prevent such disasters, chips are manufactured in a totally clean environment. That's where these shoes and this hairnet come in. Before engineers and technicians can enter the clean room where chips are made, they have to dress up in these special suits. It takes more than 40 steps, including rinsing out your mouth and washing your face. I'm only on step 14, so while I get changed, Brahman will tell you about the first step in creating a new microprocessor, the design process. Okay, let's see. Step 15.
What's truly amazing about microprocessors is their size. About 50 transistors would fit on the width of this hair. Millions of transistors have to be fit onto a piece of silicon, no larger than a dime. And they're like miniature 20-story high skyscrapers, with circuits going over and ducking under the different floors. It takes hundreds of engineers, months of painstaking work to design a new microprocessor. Greg Wyant is an Intel engineer who helped explain the design process to us. I spoke to him recently about what's involved.
There's 4 main development stages that you need to worry about when you're designing a microprocessor. There's the architectural design stage, there's logic design, there's circuit design, and finally mask design.
This is the layout that all 4 work on, or?
Actually, it starts out, an architect is the first set of people that work on it, and what the architects are responsible for is specifying what are the features that you want inside the chip. Think of the architect of a microprocessor in much the same way as you think of an architect on a building. They're the people that come up with how tall is the building going to be, how many floors do you want in the building, is it going to have elevators, is it going to have stairs. The next team, the logic team, is responsible for taking those features that the architect specified and actually putting the logic blocks together.
So you could say they're the builders?
They're the builders. The circuit designer is the one that says, all right, I understand what the logic designer wants to do, but I need to build this physical circuitry, connect up the transistors that are going to perform that function.
How do they get all this information from this sheet onto something that small?
Well, that's the role of the mask designers, which is the last step in the process of building a microprocessor. All this information is captured in a computer. And so they go through, they test the design on the computer, it's simulated. You often hear people talk about simulating aircrafts or new cars or something like that. Same thing happens for microprocessors. Once they think they've got the design right, it then goes to a mask designer who's responsible for translating this information into the physical location that the transistors will sit on one of these chips. And so they create something called masks.
See, I had a total misconception on how these were built. I thought that there were people with tweezers picking up little dots and putting them on the chip. That's not how it goes.
That's not how it's done.
So the more transistors or building blocks you have, the better the product's going to be?
That's exactly it. So more complex microprocessors have more transistors, enabling them to do a lot more things.
Let's see. I'm almost ready, though I must admit putting on this suit without letting it touch the floor was tough. Now I'm attaching this air filter because even my breath can contaminate the chips. There. Once the design of the chip is complete, the next challenge is manufacturing it. Rebecca's been working on getting us into a wafer fabrication plant. Hey, Rebecca, you there?
Not quite, Annette, but I think this is as close as I'm gonna get. The building behind me is a fabrication plant, or fab. Now, it's such a sensitive environment that employees are about the only people allowed any closer than this. The rules are understandable, though. The clean room, which is the area inside the fab where the chips are actually manufactured, has to be 1,000 times cleaner than a hospital surgical room. But earlier, I did talk to an engineer who explained the fabrication process.
Oh my God, this is super heavy.
Definitely.
Well, what do you do with this?
Basically, this is what most of our processors are made out of, silicon ingot. And actually, silicon is derived from one of the most common material on Earth, which is from sand.
So what happens? You've got the ingot, and then how do you make the wafers?
What we do is we basically use a diamond saw and then slice the ingot into polished wafers.
What are the things I see on the top of the wafer?
We do a very specific processing steps to create patterns on these wafers.
So these are the actual circuits and transistors?
Yes, but you can't see them because if you can take a closer look at it, some of these have repeating patterns. Each one of them is actually a processor. And within it, they have anywhere from tens of thousands to millions of transistors on them. So in order to make sure that all of them function properly, we had to make our processing factory very, very clean. In order to make these complex chips with millions of transistors on them, we needed a special place to do it. This special place is called fab, short for fabrication facility. And within it, there's a place called clean room, and that's where all the processing is done. All the people inside the clean room wear special suits, something almost like a spacesuit. They also wear special booties, helmets, and gloves. So it's quite interesting to go in and take a look at the fab because everybody looks like they're from outer space. Now you may ask why we need the clean room. It is because our chips are so small now and our circuits are so tiny that unless we take care in avoiding all particles, such as particles in the air, dandruff, particles from your sneezes, all of them could fall onto the wafer and therefore ruin your entire chip. The robots are there to help us automate, meaning automatically process these wafers. The robot will automatically pick up the wafers, put them in the machine, and process them.
Well, what are the technologies that you use in the fabrication process?
Well, actually, if you look at it, it's actually a very simple four-step processing which will lay our patterns onto the wafer. And then what we do is we combine these different four processes to create what we call the skyscraper or a city onto these wafers. First, we deposit a layer of material onto the wafer. This material can be either a conductor or an insulator. Second, we deposit another layer of material called photoresist onto the wafer. This photoresist is a light-sensitive chemical. This is how we're going to create our circuits now. What we do is we put a mask over our material. This mask contains images of our circuits. We then expose the mask to some special kind of light, which would then expose the photoresist. Third, we will then etch the photoresist away using very strong chemicals. In that way, it will also directly etch the material below it.
And that's how you get the patterns that we saw on the wafer.
Exactly, because we cannot deposit material at will, meaning anywhere we want. That's why we had to slowly build up the material by putting it everywhere we can on the wafer and then taking away the material we don't want.
So it's like somebody carving or whittling.
Definitely.
Okay.
That's the way it goes. Now after we're done with this, the fourth step is what we will do to embed different kinds of material into that layer to change its characteristics. Finally, we'll remove the unneeded photoresist, and then we start the process over again.
So even though this wafer, I mean, to me it looks really flat, but it's actually got layers and layers of materials on them?
That's right. Some of our latest processors are actually very, very thick. So if you think about a skyscraper, it is actually quite tall.
Microprocessors are becoming so complex and the transistors are so small that some think we're reaching the limits of the technology. New fabs now in the planning stage will cost even more to build, and scientists are already working on new technologies that will take us to the next level of computing power. They're probably working on the next level of bunny suit, too. Well, I'm ready. I wonder if these will come in colors. Computers have become increasingly powerful over the years. They've changed the way we work, the games we play, even how we communicate. We've discovered that computers become much more powerful when they're linked to networks. By connecting people in distant locations, networks have dramatically increased the exchange of information and ideas and fostered new ways of working together.
To illustrate the power of the computer as a communications tool, I'm talking with you today from home on one of the first internet video phones. The first networks were local area networks, or LANs, that linked computers within one office or school. Then wide area networks, or WANs, linked computers in different cities, states, or countries.
But there was another even bigger network evolving. Since 1969, people around the world have been communicating through a huge network developed by the United States government. It was called ARPANET for Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. It was really a network of networks, and it required obscure commands and addresses. You could only type in words, there were no pictures, graphics, or clickable buttons, and it was used primarily by scientists and engineers.
Then, in the early 1990s, programmers developed new ways to navigate around this network. New software tools allowed you to point and click your way to the information you wanted. The circle of people using the internet expanded beyond the scientific and engineering communities. It grew very fast and very large, creating what some have called the information superhighway.
Using internet applications like the World Wide Web, people began sending images, voices, even video over their networks. Computers were linked, the power was evident. They'd never be unlinked again.
In today's program, we'll explore the world of computer networks. It's important we understand how networks operate because they're changing our lives. First, let's see how information moves through a network. Brahman has that story.
Traffic is a bear today, but hey, that's okay, because a crowded freeway will give you a good idea of how traffic flows or how it doesn't flow on a computer network. Now, the first thing that I need you to understand is that when information moves along a network, it doesn't come in just one shipment. Instead, the message is divided into packets. These packets are like the cars on our network highway. As it's loaded, each packet immediately speeds off with its part of the message. The on-ramp for many network highways is a computer modem. That's short for modulator-demodulator. The modem takes the computer's digital information and converts it into a form that can travel over telephone lines.
There's a major traffic jam on the central
Routers are the traffic network reporters. Now, these routers can determine the fastest path for each packet and also help it to avoid network traffic jams. Now, what's interesting is these packets that travel in the same message, they can travel on completely different roads. It's only after the packets reach the correct network off-ramp, your modem, and make it into your computer that they're reassembled into the original message and displayed on your screen. Now, imagine if you gave each of your friends part of a message and sent them across town to reassemble it. Do you think they'd ever get it back together again? And would it be in the right order? That's the network traffic story from here, Annette.
Hope you make it to your next assignment, Brahman. Now that you know how information travels on a network, let's look at what slows things down. Okay, first you need to understand that data comes in different sizes. Each of these balls represents a data packet. The small balls hold only letters and numbers. The large balls hold things like graphics, video, or audio. They're bigger because they require a lot more bits of information. Obviously, they also require a lot more carrying capacity or bandwidth from the network. These pipes represent a range of different network connections. Most home computers are connected to regular phone lines with a modem. Modems are rated by their speed, which is measured in bits per second, or BPS. The higher the number, the faster you can send and receive information. Early network connections were about this size. Modems and fax machines both transmitted at a speed of 9,600 bits per second. That was fine if you just wanted to send a trickle of letters and numbers. But a video file? Forget it. It would take too long. A 28/8 modem is like this pipe. If you squeeze a text packet, you can push it through. That's called compression. When it reaches the other end, it decompresses. Many files actually go through this compression-decompression process. With a bit more compression, you can even send large video and graphics packets, and they come out just fine. That brings us to our digital connections. An ISDN line has a much greater bandwidth than a standard phone line. It's a pipe like this. Small packets fly through it, while more complex packets slide through it smoothly, even without compression. An even faster kind of digital connection is the dedicated T1 line. It can handle over 1.5 megabits of data per second, more than 50 times as much as a 28/8 modem. That's baskets full of data. As network bandwidth increases, we'll be able to send even larger, more complex files. This technology is changing the way we do business, the way we communicate, even the way we learn. Rebecca recently visited a California high school where students learn almost everything on networked computers.
Welcome to New Technology High School. Now, at first glance, it looks like a normal school, but once you get inside, you'll see it's anything but normal. The cable ladders that run everywhere are the first giveaway. The classrooms are the second. Students work in an open environment with computers on almost every desk. This is a networked school. Everything is done on the network. The school attracts students with a wide range of backgrounds. Some have had no computer experience, while others are very experienced. What do they think about the program? How much experience did you have with computers before you came here?
I didn't have any.
And how has that changed?
Now I have a job where I'm actually using computers every day, and I have learned so much that I've been able to go home and teach other people.
On the first day of school, they were talking about logging on to the computer and all this other stuff, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, so this year I learned a lot.
We use the internet a lot to research on our research papers. We use it all.
We didn't have to drive down to the library or so. Everything is just right there. Just type in a couple words and it'll find it for you.
Everything you could possibly think of that we would do in class, we could actually turn into our teacher through email and never have to print it out.
So you're saying you could turn in a paper and there would never actually be a paper?
No. She could actually grade it right there on her computer and email it right back to us with a grade on it. And we can keep it in our files. That way we could prove our grade and we'll never have to carry paper around. There's no more, oh, my dog ate it, or I left it at home, because it's supposed to be sitting right there on the network.
This whole thing is a business environment. So when you have a business environment, they kind of give you preparation for college and also to go right out into the business world and get a high-paying job.
What would your dream job be using the stuff you've learned here?
Animator, producer, director, in the animation field, I guess.
New Technology High is just completing its first year of operation. Next year, the program will double its size. Already, though, they've charted a course for how computer networks will be used in schools of the future.
Networking provides a host of opportunities for working together, but it also forces us to take on new responsibilities. Keep in mind, no one monitors the content on the internet. It's up to you to judge the quality of information you receive. As a member of a virtual community, you'll have access to exciting new worlds. Use the tool wisely, and everyone will benefit. You're living through a revolution, a technological revolution. As computers and microprocessors become more powerful and more widespread, they're changing the world. It's happening right now. Paul Ceruzia, curator at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., puts it all in perspective.
It's no longer surprising to say that computers are everywhere. I mean, not only are they in the obvious places like on a desktop in an office or in a video game, but they're everywhere else too. Now, what happens when a technology like this becomes so widespread in society? A revolution happens. And how do we know that? Because it's happened before. Henry Ford didn't invent automobiles. He created a way to mass produce the Model T, a car that was inexpensive and of very high quality. The first cars were handmade, one at a time, and they were very expensive. By making cars inexpensive enough so that anyone could afford them, Henry Ford changed the world. In a sense, the whole world shrank. It gave us all kinds of things that we never could have anticipated, like highways, motels, traffic signals, traffic cops, all kinds of things, all because of the Model T. Once enough people start using a technology, it changes the world forever. People live differently, they work differently, they even think differently. When a technology first appears, no one really knows what direction it's going to go in. But one thing we do know, and that's that those who learn to use the technology are the ones who are going to determine its future. The telephone's another good example. Alexander Graham Bell, the guy who invented it, thought it would be used for things like broadcasting music into the home. He never thought that people would use it to make calls from one telephone to the other because he thought the wiring would be too complicated. But then the switchboard was invented, which allowed you to do just that, connect every phone to every other phone. And before you knew it, everybody wanted telephones to make calls to each other. It sounds so obvious today, but it was really remarkable back then. In fact, we take all this so much for granted that we can't imagine that this brilliant man, Alexander Graham Bell, didn't foresee this use of the telephone. The first computers were handmade, one at a time. They were very expensive. Only federal government or large corporations could afford them. But with the invention of the microprocessor, all that changed. Microprocessors are mass-produced. They're small, they're cheap, but they have a tremendous amount of power. This one, for example, has more power than this ENIAC, which is the world's first computer. The mass-produced car let us travel like never before. The telephone let us communicate as never before. And the microprocessor is going to affect all those things and more.
How is this computer revolution going to affect your life? It's going to change everything. How you learn, where you work, and what you do for fun. A group of teens in Palo Alto, California are making sure they'll be ready. They're learning firsthand about the careers of tomorrow. Brahman has a story.
There's plenty of computing power around here, but this isn't a school computer lab. This is a business run by students. Welcome to Plugged In.
Plugged In Enterprises is a production company run by high school students based here in East Palo Alto. We create web pages, animations, 3D graphics, graphic designs, and desktop publications for profit.
Most kids your age are out playing. How does it feel to be working in your own business?
For me, it feels great. I mean, I'm pretty much doing things that I want to do, so I'm having fun while I'm doing it. And I'm making money at the same time. Who doesn't want to do that?
At my age, I'd probably be working too. I'd probably be like saying, you know, you pick up your order at the next window, please.
Do you find it weird working now at your age in a business rather than playing with your friends and, you know, going to the movies and hanging out?
Actually, no, because I like to come over here, you know, it's just like school, you know, you get to learn and you get paid too.
Do you get stuff from your friends about being a girl and working with computers, or?
Not at all. I tell my friends that it's interesting, it's important, it's fun, actually, learning. I think they should do it.
I didn't really know all that much, but then as I got more educated and more into it, it just drew me right in.
What do you tell your friends about working on computers?
My friends are kind of envious because I show them the work I've done, and they're like, hook me up with the job over there. And it's like, no, they're proud of me.
I bring my friends over here so they can learn also. When you tell them about the internet, they're like, how do you do that? How do you do that? So you get them interested into doing some stuff, seeing videos on the net, rap videos.
What do you think about the future of technology?
If you want to be in the job, you have to know computers and you have to know technology. I think technology is forever changing, and it's really getting interesting now. We're learning a lot.
The future is going to be all about computers. I mean, computers may run everything, so you might as well have a head start.
Annette, Plugged In isn't just about technology. It's about opportunities. And as these kids have learned, the possibilities are here right now.
The kids at Plugged In are starting out on computer-based careers. But when you really look at it, all future careers will be affected by computers. Here's what I mean.
Don't even ask what time it is. We're here at a working dairy farm. Easy life, huh? Well, this Holstein and her sisters are still the center of attention for dairy farmers, but how the milk gets from the business end of the cow to your bowl of cereal is anything but low tech. Say hello to Becky Branding. She's one of the herdsmen here, and at the heart of her job is a Pentium processor-based PC and 4 kinds of software. But she's not the only one who's connected. So are the cows. Can you tell me about those collars that are on all the cows?
Right. They contain the cow's identification number, and when the cows come into the parlor, they walk by this antenna here, and this will register to the computer, and the computer will then send back the cow's record into these meters, and that way we can keep an exact monitor on how much that individual cow is giving at the time. We don't have to do it by hand because it's so labor intensive. It's a vacuum pump, basically. When the milk let down, slows down for about 30 seconds, it'll automatically pull itself off.
So this is all computerized?
Oh yeah. This is all hooked up to the computer in the main office. And each one, these mini computers here interface with the computer in the office.
So what do we do with the information from the barn? Well, I'm here with Eric Heidman, and he's going to explain what the computer does with all that data.
We can pull up various records, everything from individual files on milk to calving to various health records. Just like as if you and I were a professional athlete, we could tell when someone's sick, not feeling well, if someone's not eating, because their performance will drop. For instance, this is one cow right here, and we can see that she came in on this date, which would be this morning, at 5:46 in the morning, gave 61.9 pounds. The computer is such a vital resource here. We do everything on it, and it helps us sort information in ways that would take days or hours to even dream up by hand. We're going to start seeing them every place, and everyone's going to need to know how to use them.
And if computers are revolutionizing the dairy business, you should see what they're doing for mechanics.
An auto shop looks pretty familiar to us, but underneath these hoods and along these walls, the cars and tools we work with are changing. Let's meet Pat Banta, who runs his own auto shop.
You're constantly having to update yourself on computers and computer controls because with every new make, a new model, they come out with something different.
Can you start your car without the computer working?
Nope.
Nope.
Car won't work without the computer. The anti-lock brake system runs through the computer. The cruise control runs through the computer. You have fiber optics that run into your steering wheel that run through the computer. On this car, power steering uses a sensor to the computer. Alternator goes to the computer.
So compared to a while ago, knowing just each component and how the engine works, now you have to have a bit of computer technology to understand.
There's going to be a two-class society in automotive technicians. You're going to have your high-end computer literate technician that's going to come in, diagnose the car, tell you what's wrong with it, and then he's going to have his basic person that's going to come behind him and put the part on the car, and he'll make $20,000, $25,000 a year doing that. But you're going to have your high-end technician that's going to make $80,000 and $90,000 a year. That you really have to be good in all the other subjects that you do in school. You have to be good in math because you need to be able to handle Ohm's law. You really need algebra, which most people say, what do I use algebra for? And say, I'll never use it in my life. You do use it when you come to this. It basically trains you for analytical thinking. It trains you in the way you think.
Technology is transforming our lives in exciting and often unexpected ways, creating opportunities we're just beginning to see. Think about that. What happens inside a computer is amazing, but today we're going to take a journey outside the computer and into the future to see what computers will be doing for us. Actually, it's happening already. It's called convergence, which means coming together. Convergence is when your PC starts acting like a television and your television starts acting like a theater. And your phone? It could be anywhere. We'll probably stop thinking of all these things as separate items and they'll just be different parts of one device. All this technology will be as close as a keypad, a keyboard, or as Rebecca discovered, a car key.
A net convergence is taking place everywhere, even on the highway. Imagine gathering up all the computer power you have at home and taking it on the road. Engineers are already heading that way. They call it the connected car, and it's in development right now.
Picture an automobile where this small screen here is up somewhere close to the dashboard where a driver can just glance at it. We use speech recognition so the computer talks to the driver without him having to look and take his hands off the wheel.
I'm lost in San Francisco. What can this do for me?
If you're downtown, you can get a close-up of where you are downtown by saying locate on map.
Oh, there I am.
Okay.
Performing security check.
Just checking your home security system.
It actually knows what's going on at my house?
But listen.
Warning. Your garage door is open. Would you like it closed?
Say yes.
Yes.
Garage door secure.
You've just shut your garage door from your car, and you know the rest of your house is safe.
And I don't have to take the 10 minutes to go home and fix it.
That's right.
So I'm totally disorganized, and I need to remember like 40 million things. How does this help?
You left yourself a message earlier in the day, and you want to check what it is. So say the word notepad.
Notepad.
You have one message. Would you like to retrieve it?
Yes.
Yes.
Message 1. Pick up kids at 5 p.m.
You can't forget to do that.
See, I'm really losing it. I even forgot that I had kids.
And the computer reminded you to pick them up at 5 o'clock.
I guess so. And I'll try to think of their names in the meantime. So in the back seat, you've got all kinds of entertainment too, right?
Right. So suppose you want to go for a trip, and little Johnny's in the room playing a game. He doesn't want to leave. But if you can pick that game up and take it with him and finish it off in the car.
The same game?
The exact same game. And certainly be entertained there. Be productive as well.
And pick up right where he left off.
Pick up right where you left off.
So where is all this technology headed?
Well, the technology is converging. You've got communications technology, the satellites and the cell phones, and you've got computer technology, which has been traditionally on your desktop or in a laptop. Well, that's moving into your car. Overall, it just makes life a lot easier to live. It seems complex, all right? But in the long run, it really does a lot for us.
The amazing thing, Annette, is how soon this convergence of cars and computers will happen. Engineers say connected cars will be in showrooms by the year 2002.
Thanks, Rebecca. Let's just hope we can keep our minds on the road. A lot more than cars will be connected in the future. Today, people use networks, but soon, we may be the network. Brahman has the story.
With technology getting smaller and more powerful, we'll soon have computers you can slip into the inner sole of your shoe. Why? Well, it's your own personal database. It can carry credit card info, frequently called phone numbers, phone calling cards, even your student body card. But all this information doesn't do you much good if it's stuck in your shoe. It has to travel out to a personal digital device, a wristwatch display maybe. How? Well, through your body. The computer will connect to the display using your body's natural electrical conductivity. Why would you want to be a walking network? Well, think about the devices you touch every day. Pick up a phone and it automatically accesses your frequently called numbers and calling card codes. You wouldn't even have to dial. And how's this for personal contact? Just shake hands with a new friend and both of you automatically exchange phone numbers. The data will be encrypted so you'll still have control over it. It'll just be a lot easier to share.
Bodynet puts information at your fingertips, or at least at the soles of your feet. Teachers are always looking for ways to get information into students' brains, and computers are opening up some exciting possibilities. Join us now for a little bit of time traveling. Imagine a world history class where instead of reading about ancient Rome, you actually went there and looked around. Using virtual reality, 2 UCLA professors are making this vision come true. Diane Favreau, one of these time travelers, thinks that such programs will change the future of education.
For a student looking at a virtual reality environment, I think it's a way to really engage their interest. It's a lot more fun. And I think today we're visually oriented, and seeing environments and moving through them is a way to help us remember about them.
Favreau and her colleague Bernard Frischer have researched and recreated an exact cyberspace replica of a real first-century Roman temple for students to explore. Now they plan to expand beyond the temple.
One of the most exciting things for me is to be able to meet people in ancient Rome, that I can meet my students, they'd all come together, we'd talk about things, and then I'd send some off to go look at the Roman Forum, others to go look at chariot races. You'll hear street sounds, you'll be able to look at individual buildings and people, and then we'd all come back together, maybe meet in the Colosseum and sit and talk about what we've seen and heard and done. But we'd like to do many other virtual cities in the future, including cities from Africa, from South America, from the Far East, from the Near East, from all over the world, so people can have the opportunity to visit different historical environments and different peoples.
Bodynets, connected cars, time travel, it's all possible because the chips at the heart of every computer keep getting smaller and more powerful. In fact, it's a law, Moore's Law, named after Gordon Moore, one of Intel's founders. He noticed back in 1965 that a chip's power doubled about every 18 months and predicted the trend would continue. He was right. Think about the math. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. In just over a decade, a chip's power increases by a factor of 256. Imagine if cars had increased their gas mileage and speed at the same rate for the last 10 years. We'd get 5,120 miles to the gallon and travel at speeds of up to 14,080 miles per hour. Too bad Moore's Law doesn't apply to cars. So where is all this computer power taking us? Only time will tell for sure, but some high school students already have a vision for how they want to use it. Rebecca has the story.
If you can imagine it, you can build it. That seems to be the motto of many of the students who participated in the 1997 Intel International Science and Engineering Fair. I spoke with 2 students whose ingenious inventions are designed to help a lot of people. Brian Johnson was inspired by his grandmother, an avid reader and letter writer who was beginning to lose her vision.
So tell me how your invention works.
What this invention does is it takes computer and digital text and turns it into Braille for the sight impaired. If you were blind, in order to read a computer, you need either a voice synthesizer or this device that allows you to read the digital text. Let me show you how it works.
So there we've got a message right there.
It says, "Welcome to the journey inside the computer." So if you were sight impaired, you would see this message appearing on this display. It's called the active tactile display.
The dots are coming up.
The dots are popping up just as they are as you would read across the screen.
So this converts the text on the computer, and it's the same as reading Braille on paper, but you can do it using just the screen?
You can do it using this invention.
What gave you the inspiration for this invention?
Well, my grandmother recently went blind, and in doing so, she was unable to write letters back home to the family like she typically did almost weekly. And so the idea was to use modern technology and email for her to email the family. But of course, she's able to type it but not receive email because she can't see the computer screen. And of course, when we got to researching devices that would allow her to read computer text or emails that we would send her in Braille, they were extremely expensive. From there, I asked questions like, what's currently available? And what can I do to overcome certain problems in this experiment, like getting dots to raise up on a pad?
So there's always another question.
And there's always more answers.
Each year, more than 2,000 people, mostly young children, drown in backyard swimming pools. Rebecca Rocco's family had a pool, and she was concerned.
So explain how your project works to me. There's a pulse sent in the water and hits the skin and detects the child in the water. Other objects in the swimming pool, such as a pool chair, will not set off the alarm because its reflection of sound, the echo, is different than that of skin. When a child is in the swimming pool and not supposed to be there, this will detect the child and prevent a child from drowning.
How much background did you have in technology before you started?
Very limited. I didn't have much. I done a little computer work in school. We had a computer lab, chemistry, biology, stuff I learned in middle school. Just personal interest. It was just a matter of coming up with the idea and then finding someone and then learning from that point on. What I really gained from this project is knowing that although I'm young and I'm just going to colleges, I've been doing this during high school, I can affect society and I can make a change.
Both Brian and Rebecca saw a way to help people, and their inventions will make a real difference. Students everywhere can do the same.
Computer technology will continue to become more powerful. It's up to each of us to decide where it takes us. Thanks for joining us on the journey inside the computer. We hope it inspires each of you on your own journey.